start working on getting ready for production while you're prototyping before you have a polished prototype. You start working with them when you start sourcing materials or components to kind of get an idea of the pricing. You want to make sure not to completely show the whole build yet, because it's a relationship and you don't want to overpromise that you're going to be spending a certain amount. And you also want to make sure you're getting the best deals. And so you kind of have to show what you need to at the right time. And so that's just something you're going to learn over time. So as you're prototyping, you're constantly getting quotes on prices and materials, and that helps you make your decision on what pieces and features you're going to include in the product experience. But once you have a finalized design set and ready, usually go out to the manufacturers, you bring the prototype and you show them. You walk through the product. If you have a legacy product, you then talk about what you found in the past during production runs were issues with quality and durability and costs, and you review that. If it's a whole new product, you talk about the experience. A lot of manufacturers are going to kind of think about the engineering on top of your own engineering development, and they're going to make suggestions. And sometimes their suggestions are great, but if they don't know the user experience, they might make decisions that completely negate what you were trying to achieve. They're going to want to help you with the engineering decisions, and educating them on the user experience will help them make better suggestions, because if you don't educate them, they're going to suggest things that completely negate the whole point of a feature. Most recently, I was working with a possible packaging supplier, and they changed our packaging design that completely removed our ability to use the packaging as storage. And that's the whole point of the packaging and why we're designing such nice packaging, so we can reuse it. The user can reuse it. We then communicated with them and they got it. And then we worked together to kind of like evolve, because they were trying to give us cost savings, but in doing so, they lost something. So you go and you meet with the manufacturer, you share with them the prototype. You want to make sure if you're working with a manufacturer, like a contract manufacturer that works with a bunch of suppliers, you want to go out and visit the suppliers. That's really important because, one, you want to check the quality, but you also want to make sure they're running an ethical business and they're taking care of their team. Designing good products is all about the little details, from, as I mentioned, the quality of the product, the quality of the user experience, and then also making sure the supply chain is respectful and you're working with great partners, because that represents your brand as well. You'll hand over the prototype, you'll go over the pricing of all the pieces and components, and then they'll send out samples for you to review. This maybe is a little bit before the final design process, so you can tweak, and you're sharing cost estimates in this time period. You might be making tweaks to the design and modifications. You're testing it in the whole system as a whole. And then once you have a final design, set pricing, they'll give you the last samples, and you need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, because even the slightest detail could affect something long-term that you weren't aware of. 2 years ago, when we were reviewing our final product, we caught an error where we had a slight fillet. It was a chamber instead of a fillet on the screw. And it completely made it impossible for a young user to insert the insert the nut into the slot for the assembly. And you couldn't really tell by the naked eye, and it was just a slight smoothing, but it completely changed the experience. And so having a keen eye for those little details is essential. So sometimes when you're building out a team or people to work with, you should have people on your team that can see the big picture, can see the past and the future for research. And then you need people who can see little details. They are usually better at the later stages of the development process. They should be working more closely with the production team, and people who have bigger picture ideas probably should be working more in concepting early stages. So when you're finalizing a concept, you have to balance business needs, which a lot of the time is costs. And so you might have to cut features. And to make those tough decisions, I rely on my instincts. And that is something you're going to have to develop and curate over the years and nurture. You have it in the back of your head telling you something's not working, something's not right. If I get rid of this part, how will it affect the whole system, the whole architecture? As I've mentioned before, long term, it's going to turn your product into a better experience. It's trusting yourself, using research. The research you collected really helps you quickly make those decisions as well. So it's balancing research and your instincts as a designer to determine what features to cut and keep when maybe an aspect of the design is too expensive or it will slow down production. A lot of time too, when you're in production, you have to determine if you're re-engineering an existing product, you might want to pause on producing some of the new features. Depending on your product, you can design them so they're segmented, so you can roll up production. Maybe it's a cost thing because you need a lot of upfront costs to do production, unless you work with a manufacturer that kind of lets you have a more quarterly schedule versus a yearly schedule. And so that all like deciding on cutting features, deciding what features actually produce for this production run or the next are also essential decisions. You have to use your instincts and using the data you collected when you were developing to kind of judge. So when you are developing, you have the opportunities to pick and choose materials, pick and choose the features, pick and choose the overall experience. But when you move into one concept and you are finalizing the BOM and the samples with the manufacturer, you have to do a design freeze. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to go into full production. One, it lessens the trust and the relationship you have with the manufacturer because you kind of made a promise that this is what you're going to go for with. Sometimes you might have a serious issue, an electrical flaw that you have to fix. In those instances, of course, it's okay to then alter and change. But best practices is to avoid when you're on the production line being like, halt, stop, we got to change something, because that's when you start having flaws. The reason why you do iterative testing while you're developing is so you can actually manufacture a perfect product. Keep in mind, it's never perfect. You're gonna, after you release it into the wild, the real marketplace, you should be continuing testing. So every time I go out and I test new concepts, I bring our current products as well, just to constantly stay fresh and seeing if there's new things or ways to improve. Sometimes you'll learn, oh, I can completely change the platform. I have a way better idea how to improve this and completely change how it works. Or it could be slight little tweaks you need to make to improve it.